On today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we are continuing our series building an NDAA compliant FPV drone. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than what I pitched originally. Originally, I wanted to do the ESC, or the electronic speed controller, and the motors and integrate them into the frame at the same time. Due to some time constraints that I'm trying to hold myself to in this video series, as well as just some additional information about motors that I want to share with you when it comes to building your FPV drones, I felt that it'd be better to keep them in separate videos. So today we're focused entirely on the electronic speed controller. We're going to implement that. We're going to solder the power leads to it, the capacitor to it, and I'm going to show you a few other things as well. Let's not waste any more time. Let's talk drones. We're going to need a few different components here to implement our electronic speed controller, our ESC, into our drone build. So this is our electronic speed controller. This is the TBS Lucid 8S 4-in-1 ESC. An ESC, an electronic speed controller, to sort of give you an idea of the role it plays in your drone. This is the heartbeat of your drone. This is the heart of your drone. It's going to provide the power necessary for the rest of the drone to operate, much like your blood or your heart pumps blood through your body to provide oxygen to your organs and different parts of your body. This does the same, but with the battery and the electricity that it generates through the connection to the battery. So that's what the role that the ESC plays in layman's terms. We're going to need that. We're also going to need a power lead. I'm using a 12, I keep saying 20, a 12 gauge power lead. So we've got our ground and our positive, and I'm using an XT60 connector. Depending upon the size of your build, you're going to need certain size connections because you're going to need different types of connections between your battery and your drone. For a 5-inch build that we're building, an XT60 is plenty. So this is the one that we're going to go with. This is also the most common in FPV. We also need a capacitor. I'm not an electrical engineer. I just know a little bit about how it relates to drones. Essentially what your capacitor does is it takes excess energy, anything that would cause noise or disruptions in the signals in your drone, sort of stores it in there and takes the burden off of your drone. So if you don't have a capacitor, there are a couple things that can happen. The most frequent and common, and the ones that you're going to notice first, are you're going to see noise in your camera feed, your camera display, especially if you're using analog, but it happens in digital as well. You're also going to feel your drone won't fly as smoothly as you might like it to. And in a worst case scenario, you'll have an issue where you have overcurrent going to your motors, going to different components of your drone, and it will actually destroy components on your drone. So capacitors for 5-inch drones are typically recommended, especially for larger ESCs like this one. So we're going to be using this capacitor that came with the ESC. If you're using the exact same ESC that I'm using in this build, then this will come with the kit, so you don't have to worry about supplying your own. You'll see here, mine looks a little different than the ones that I just showed you in the box, and the one that you might be looking at on your workstation. You're going to see two like silver, they almost look like the solder here, two silver leads or metal leads that are coming off the bottom of this. I've added motor wires, or just smaller gauge wire, to those leads, and I've heat shrunk them and soldered them together to get a nice solid connection. The reason I've done that is because I like to have as much flexibility in where I place my capacitor in my drone frame as possible. So I've done that ahead of time here. I can do another video in the future if that interests you guys on how you implement these wires. It's pretty easy and straightforward. There's tons of videos out there that will explain to you how to do this, but that's what I've done here, and that's why it might look a little bit different. One note you want to make on your capacitor is that silver streak right there. You'll see there's a dash on it. That is your ground. The other lead, so that means this lead right here that's on the side with this stripe is our ground. This is our positive. So we want to make sure we orient those correctly when we incorporate them onto the ESC. Otherwise, we're going to have some issues. You're also going to need flux. Now, mine looks really ratty and charred and terrible because I use it a lot, and I'm going to recommend that you do the same. You cannot use too much flux. Okay, you can. There is such thing as too much flux, but there's no real consequence to using too much flux. Be liberal with this and make sure that you have it on hand before you start soldering. It's going to make your life so much easier. You'll see how I incorporate that later on. And then, of course, our solder, which is what we need to incorporate the ESC power leads and the capacitor before we put it on the frame of the drone. I like to use leaded solder. It has a lower melting point. It's easier to get to that liquid state that you need it to manipulate it. You can use lead-free solder. In fact, I know a lot of people that really like it. You are going to need to use way more flux if you use lead-free solder. So keep that in mind. I do use this. I also use facial protection when I use this. You don't want to be breathing in that smoke that has that lead base in it for too much, because it can wreak havoc on you. So make sure that you're using the proper protections when you are using this solder, because it does have lead base to it, but it does work, I think, better than non-lead based solder. So I also have a pair of tweezers that I'm going to use to pick up, navigate, pull these wires, because when you have a soldering iron tip on the ends of these wires, they tend to get very, very hot. So rather than burn my fingers, I use tweezers to hold everything in place. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna place our solder off camera here, and I'm just gonna unwheel a little bit of that because we'll be using that here in a moment. I'm going to set our flux in front of us. The tweezers can go to the side, capacitor can go to the side. We're gonna start with our power lead. So before we get started, I am going to put my mask on so that I'm doing this safely, and we will get started. Before we actually get to the leads though, I do want to just call attention to what I've done ahead of time here on the ESC. So you'll see that the pads are silver. The pads on your ESC, if you're just breaking it open for the first time, will be like a dull gold. And that's normal. The reason that mine are silver is because I've pre-tinned my ESC pads. And the reason I do that is because it makes it easier to actually solder the components to it once the solder's already tinned onto the pads. So all I have to do is really heat this up, and then it's easier to incorporate more solder, to incorporate other components like these leads, for instance, and make sure that everything is getting a nice, clean solder joint on it. You don't want a cold solder situation. I've seen that time and again. I'm guilty of it, where you don't have the solder bind the way it's supposed to, and then all of a sudden you've got an unstable and unreliable solder joint that breaks off mid-flight. Now all of a sudden you've got a real problem on your hands, especially when it comes to the ESC. So I go through and I pre-tin everything. The way that you do that, just gonna give you a quick demo here. I dip my tip right into the solder, and to pre-tin our solder, this is all we do, or pre-tin our pad, we just dance the tip over top of it, and if you need, and I think I'm gonna need it, I just need a little bit more flux. Yep, there we go. Now we're getting some heat on it. And you'll see that we got a nice liquid state on that pad. So you're gonna do that, and then you'll slowly incorporate solder to the surface. And as you do that, you'll see more and more will tin the surface of your pad. And then when we remove the solder tip, it will dry or cool down, I guess is really the actual technical term. It'll cool off and it will bind to the pad. So that's how you go through and you pre-tin. You just do that on each of these pads. I also recommend, highly recommend, let me just clean this off for you so you can see it. I highly recommend a chisel tip. So there's many different types of solder tips that you can use, and each of them is different for different scenarios. So chisel tip is great for these larger pads, especially these larger chisel tips, excuse me. It just spreads the heat very evenly because you've got that nice flat surface on the bottom of it that you can sort of dance and glide over top of the surface of the pad. Heats everything nice and evenly, and it has a lot of heat on that flat surface. So it's much more efficient than a smaller tip. You could do it with a smaller tip. I just wouldn't recommend it. So now that we've sort of gone over pre-tinning, what we want to do is we want to pre-tin our wires, and same thing here. I have a heat resistant pad here, so I can actually put my soldering iron right against it, and it will warp it a little bit, but it goes back into form. So this is totally fine for me to do. But to basically pre-tin your wires, you do the same thing. I just put it right down against it on my heat resistant mat. You'll see and you'll feel the tips start to liquefy, and then that's when you incorporate solder into it. Now that nasty smoke, you don't want to breathe that in. That's why I have a mask on. So we've pre-tinned our ground. Let's go ahead and pre-tin our lead, or our power lead, our positive. I'm saying words. I already sort of had these pre-tinned as well. Full disclosure, this power lead is one that I cannibalized from a different drone. They're really cheap. You can buy those very cheap on Amazon as well. But I had it laying around, so I thought, might as well use it. So that's that. We've got everything pre-tinned at this point. Now it's just a matter of incorporating it onto our electronic speed controller. So this is where things might get a little bit, not sketchy, but just keep in mind that I'm doing the best I can here, production value wise. I am gonna flip these around because my right hand is what I use to manipulate the soldering iron. So the leads you'll see here, I'm just gonna try to keep those in frame for you. The leads you see here, we have our ground and we have our positive. So I just always have my power lead lined up accordingly. And then from here, what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna clean off the soldering iron. Now that we've got a nice clean tip, just add some flux. And from here, we're going to come down on this pad like so. I'm going to incorporate that into our pad, and everything should liquefy nicely for you if you pre-tinned well enough. There you go. Okay, now there's obviously, this could be a lot prettier, so I'm going to just pretty this up a little bit. Bingo. Okay, it's not the most beautiful solder that I've ever done, but it's passable. It's definitely good enough. So we're just gonna go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. There's something therapeutic about soldering to me. I actually really enjoy this. It's just so, I don't know, it's mesmerizing to see what is essentially metal liquefy like that and do what I want it to do. But let's just work it over. Bingo. Wow, that was actually easier to get shaped the way I wanted it to be. I'm a little bit anal when it comes to the solder and how it looks. So, and I'll show you, it looks like crappy. You can see here, I just want to pick this up without burning myself. You can see here, there's like some corrosion built up, or it looks like some brown substance on the pads. That's normal when you're using flux or flux-based solder. There's some solder that's cored with flux. That is normal. I'm going to show you how to clean that up once we're done with all of the soldering, right before we put this on the frame so that it's set into place. So don't be concerned about that, how it looks. It's going to be okay. So the next portion of this, and the final portion of this, is incorporating our capacitor. Again, stripe is our ground, so we're gonna keep that on the left with the black, and the black side here is our positive, or I have it set so that this lead is longer than this lead, which is how it'll come by default with those two metal leads that come out of the bottom, is your ground will be shorter and your positive will be longer. So I kept it that way with the motor wires as well. Now, I keep saying motor wires, you can use any gauge wire between like 20 and 28, and it should be fine for a capacitor, depending upon the size. But these are actual motor wires that I had scraps left over from when I was cutting some down, so that's what I ended up using. So, okay, we don't actually need to incorporate any more solder to this pad. If we don't want to, we can. There's no problem with that. But we don't need to in this case. We've got plenty. So I'm literally just going to come inside of the, I'm sorry, you can't see. I'm literally just going to come inside on the ESC right here, and I'm just going to apply heat. I added flux to my tip already, but if I need more, I can add more. But in the meantime, I'm just going to press, dance a little bit, liquefy that solder. I start to feel the solder on the pad liquefy, which is a good sign, and I just want to have that incorporated like so. So I'll let that cool for just a second here, and then I'll incorporate our positive, which I'm going to just do the same exact thing. And you don't have to put them on the inside. I like to. It keeps everything nice and clean for me. But I just come over here. And again, just work this in. Work the liquid on the pad, or work the solder to a liquid on the pad. Make sure we're nice and clean. Okay, I do have some little tiny frays from the wire that I want to work in here. There we go, that's clean. That's a clean joint. Okay, perfect. Wow, that was actually cleaned up a lot quicker than I thought it was going to. Okay, Excellent. So now we've got our capacitor incorporated. I may, in the final video or the final build, I may make these longer if I need to, but I think that should be okay for now, just where they're at. So this is what your electronic speed controller is going to look like when you solder it all together, pre-motor introduction. So the motors are going to go on these pads on the outside here. We'll do that in the next video. The only thing we have left to do in this video is incorporate this onto the frame. So bring our frame over. If you haven't already noticed, I 3D printed some nice little arm skids here to protect the bottom of the arms for the drone. This is not necessary for this particular build, but I like to do it because, again, it preserves the integrity of the drone's frame. So it's one less thing that I have to worry about in the short term. I can just go ahead and crash it, wreck it, land it hard, whatever I want, and these arm skids should protect it for the most part. Plus, it's like, it cost me 50 cents to $1 in TPU to print those, so it's not expensive at all. So from here, we want to just line our ESC mounting holes up with the screws that we've incorporated for the mounting pattern on our drone. And we're just going to gently, we don't need to put a lot of force on this, gently push these down. And actually, I may, oh boy, might have really screwed the pooch there. Let's try this. May need to take these standoffs off. Standoffs are out of the way, so now we can continue incorporating our ESC. Just push that down. You'll notice I do have some vibration dampeners, those black cylindrical things that are sticking out of the holes for the mounting on our ESC. Those serve a couple of different purposes. First of all, they are vibration dampeners, so it's going to limit the amount of noise that's introduced from the movement of the drone and the rotation of the motors. It's going to limit the influence that it has on the ESC and the flight controller, but also it gives you a nice little standoff area where you don't have to worry about your ESC touching your frame. This frame is carbon fiber, so if something electrically driven touches this frame, you run the risk of shorting out your drone, and then you've got big problems. So you don't want that to happen, but right now everything looks pretty clean. I am just going to pinch these motor wires in a little bit, or I'm sorry, motor wires, power leads in a little bit. Looks good. We'll reincorporate our standoffs. Okay, so now that we're back, I've got these two standoffs in there. The big thing you want to look at, especially if you're using a larger flight controller, ESC like me, is you want to make sure these standoffs, which are metal and are also touching the carbon fiber frame, aren't touching any of the solder points on the drone. So as long as that's true, and it is true, we don't have any contact with the solder points, it is touching our power leads, so that's something to be mindful of, but it's not touching any of the solder points, it's not touching anything that's going to have electricity flowing directly through it. We are good for that. Now, one of the last two things I want to show you is how do you clean these pads off? Toothbrush, rubbing alcohol. I'm going to do this off camera, spray this off camera onto the toothbrush. You can also dunk your toothbrush into it. I just had a spray bottle laying around. So you're just going to very gently brush the teeth on your power leads. That's it. Any solder joint for that matter that you do. The smaller the solder joint, the easier and more gentle you want to be with it. But they can take a little bit of elbow grease, and you do want to have a little bit on there just to get the gunk off. This isn't abundantly necessary, but it does clean your build up and makes it look nicer. You can see there, we've got nice shiny pads instead of what we had before. So at this point, our ESC is incorporated. Next, what we have to do is we have to incorporate our motors. That's going to be our next video. The only other thing I want to share with you today when it comes to the incorporation of your ESC on your drone is checking to make sure you don't have any shorts. This is a huge part of this. And we'll talk about how you can prevent yourself from shorting your drone out on the bench. Because there's no other components on the ESC right now or on the drone right now, there's no reason to plug a battery in. We'll talk about smoke stoppers and batteries in the next video because we will be plugging it in at that point. But to check your electrical connections and to make sure that you don't have any shorts anywhere, you're going to need something like this. This is a multimeter. So what your multimeter does, sorry, I can't really see where you can see and where you can't. I'm just going to adjust the camera up a little bit. There we go. So this is a multimeter. You're going to need one of these. They're pretty cheap. You can get them at a local hardware store. This is going to tell you if you've got any points connected that shouldn't be on your drone. So we're just going to do a quick check, make sure that all of these are separated and that they're not touching in any capacity. It will beep at you and holler at you if there is any type of connection like that. Okay. Nope, we don't have a connection there. I thought we did. But if you touch these together, yep, it beeps at you and hollers at you. So when we do it here, nothing. That's what we want. We can also put it in the end here where the batteries connect to the XT60. And as long as they don't chirp at us there, we're good to go. The other places we can check are just hold one of your multimeter tools to one side and just sort of walk your way up all of the different solder pads to ensure that you don't have any shorts. Motors, this might be a little bit redundant because you'd have to have a really messy solder job to have this be an issue, but I just, you know, just for the sake of showing you. And as long as it doesn't bark at you, you're good to go. And again, just to show you an example, we hold it both on the negative or both on the positive, and it beeps at us. So keep that in mind. A multimeter goes a long way in helping you in your build and making sure that nothing bad happens to your build. But again, we'll get into other methods for making sure that you don't short your drone out as you're building it in the next video.
So there you have it. We've got our FPV drone to the point where we've got the frame assembled. We've got the ESC integrated into the frame, as well as the power leads onto the pads on the ESC and the capacitor that came with the ESC. So from a power perspective, it is ready to go at this point. We also, as a bonus, showed you how to tin your pads before soldering and showed you how to actually clean your solder joints if they look a little bit dingy and disgusting after you're done using all of that flux that I recommended you use. On top of that, we also printed out some really cool little 3D printed feet for the drone, some arm skids to protect the frame of the drone when landing or crashing. What did you think of this video? Is there anything that you'd like to see that I maybe didn't cover or just skimmed over in this video? Let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, you love the series so far, let me know down in the comments as well, and make sure you hit the thumbs up icon. It helps me out a lot. It helps get this video out into the algorithm to more viewers like yourself. If you really love this video and you love drone content shot by drones, about drones, and for drone pilots, my friend, this is the channel for you. Make sure you get subscribed if you haven't already, and while you're at it, make sure you hit the bell icon too. You'll get a notification every time I post a new video. Until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek, and I'm out of here. See ya!
Yo, what you say? Steady screaming, YOLO, rock and roll, we the fight.